Given the nature of my story, what I represent and what happened to me represent the Jewish establishment's worst nightmare come true.
Did you ever kill anybody in prison?
I certainly wouldn't admit it if I had.
Did you ever kill anybody when you were a spy?
I certainly wouldn't admit that either.
A lot of people claim that you're the reason why the idea of Jewish Americans possibly having dual loyalty exists.
Yeah, I don't give a damn.
Hi, welcome to Wine with Adam. I'm your host, Adam Scott Bellos, and today, here in the city of Jerusalem, we are filming with my very special guest in his home, Jonathan Pollard. John.
Hi.
It's so great to be with you.
Well, it's wonderful to host you here.
You have a beautiful home.
Well, this one comes complete with bars, so I feel very much at home. After 30 years in prison, I was very comfortable with bars on the window.
Today, we are going to be drinking from Jonathan's favorite winery and a new winery that Wine and the Vine has started working with, the Kabir Winery in the Cimmerian Hills near Alon Moreh. They make about 5,000 bottles a year. About 5,000 bottles a year. Tons of different varieties. We happen to be tasting the Merlot today, okay, which John and I both happen to like. So to do a good Merlot, one thing is quite tough, let alone growing it where Kabir is located. You know, there's a lot that we're going to talk about today, but I'd like to introduce you to our viewers. Jonathan, you have a very interesting background, but, you know, first and foremost, you're a huge product of your parents.
Mm-hmm.
You're a son. Okay. You're a widower.
Yes.
Okay. At the same time, you're also a newlywed.
Correct.
Okay. You're a stepfather.
Correct.
Okay. And I would say the three words that most define you are you're a Zionist.
Correct.
You're an Israeli.
Correct.
And you're also a spy. Former spy.
Unfortunately, you are never really former. You're just temporarily retired.
After 30 years in prison, one of the most infamous spies ever caught in America has been released. Jonathan Pollard was convicted of giving suitcases full of classified U.S. material to the Israelis.
Pollard spied for a year in return for payments until his arrest in 1985. He said he had been frustrated by the U.S. withholding key intelligence from its staunch ally.
For decades, there has been a heated debate over the extent of the damage Pollard caused.
Jonathan Pollard and his wife Esther arrived in Tel Aviv to a welcome from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the leader saying a Hebrew prayer of thanksgiving for the liberation of prisoners.
I want to talk to you about Esther. You got married when you were in prison.
Right.
What was it that moved her and drove her? Because it's a rare thing. It's a rare woman.
Sometimes you have to go to the end to understand a beginning of something, of a process. And in her case, when she died, just before she died, she just opened her eyes, black, dilated, and she said, my neshama volunteered to come back for two missions. One was to bring you home, and the other one was to bring you home as a real Jew and not a goy. She said the first mission to bring you home was the easiest of all, which came as something as a surprise to me, 35 years. But if you knew Esther, that was typical. She said, but the hardest mission was to bring you home as a real Jew. She said, it's easy to bring a Jew from Galut to Eretz HaKodesh, but it's very hard to get the Galut, in many cases, out of the Jew's mind. So she said, Baruch Hashem, I succeeded in both of my missions, and now I can go home. I remember at the Levaya of Esther, I made a comment, I made an observation that I asked her, how do you put up with all the lies and the lashon hara and all the disputes that have broken out over your life and my life by various interested parties? And she very calmly looked at me and she said, I know who I am. I know what the truth is. God knows what the truth is. And I really don't care what anybody else thinks, chooses to think. With John Kerry, look, he made the proposition to Israel, we'll free Pollard in exchange for the release of some of the most despicable Palestinian terrorists in jail here you could imagine. People that didn't have their hands in blood, but their whole body soaked in it. But the condition was that I would never be allowed to go home to Israel, ever, under any conditions. So Esther was asked by Bibi to come put the question to me. Will you agree to this? Esther came to me in prison and she said, this is the situation, but I want you to understand that if you decide to say no and that you spend the rest of your life in prison and die in prison, or you do agree to this and spend the rest of your life in Galut, I will stay in the midbar with you, no matter what. So she said, what's your answer? So I said, no.
Sorry, sorry, just what she said kind of got to me, that's all.
But that's who she was. And
I think every man wants to hear at some point in their life that I will stay in the meat bar with you. Do you think that she saved you in a way?
No, she did. She saved me emotionally. She saved me physically. I mean, she told me, you fear no one but God. And you adhere to as much Yiddishkeit as you can while in prison under these circumstances. So I did, because of her. And she produced the person I am now.
You spent 35 years in prison. It's almost triple the amount of time that a spy would normally spend in prison, given the severity of the crimes that were associated with what you did.
Right.
What does 35 years in prison do to a man?
There's some people that go into prison and then come out worse. And there are others that go into prison, experience what they experience, and come out better. And luckily, thank God, I kind of fall under that category. I didn't engage in any vices when I was in prison. I was very careful about that. But killing was just an everyday event there.
I want to make this very clear, what you just said. In prison for 35 years, killing was an everyday event.
Yeah.
Are you saying that every day for 35 years you didn't know if you would make it to the next day?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You carried a knife. You feared no one but God. And you hoped you were quicker than the other one.
And that was it?
And that was it.
Did you ever kill anybody in prison?
I certainly wouldn't admit it if I had.
Did you ever kill anybody when you were a spy?
I certainly wouldn't admit that either.
1975, you graduate college?
Mm-hmm.
Within a year and a half, 2 years, you're in the Naval Intelligence community.
Yeah.
You leave graduate school, you leave Cambridge, you break up with a girlfriend, you go on a complete life trajectory into intelligence.
Correct.
You become an Israeli spy.
Right.
And the Iran-Iraq war begins, and a famous controversy that has loomed over the Reagan administration for many years, known as Iran-Contra, happens.
Correct.
You're involved.
Yeah, unfortunately, I was involved.
Which is something that a lot of people don't know about you. What can you tell me about your involvement in Iran-Contra?
I had two responsibilities. I was asked to open up bank accounts in Switzerland for both the American and Israeli participants in the affair.
So the Israelis were involved in Iran-Contra?
Of course, over their heads. Yeah. The second thing I did was I was asked to come up with a list of possible air defense weapons that on the market, the open market or black market, that Israel could sell to the Iranians to defend Karg Islands. I played the only card I had when I was arrested. And I told one of the prosecutors, please go to the White House and tell them I'm the guy that arranged the sale of Raptors to Iran, Hawk missiles. Mm-hmm. Israel would trade old Hawk missiles washed through Spain in exchange for new American IHawk missiles. Okay. So he did. And that night, the door opened to my cell, and I was told to go to the R&D, where you come or go, and I was being released. Wow, I thought it worked. So I got down to R&D, and I noticed that there were no prison officers there. They were all Army guys, and they were kind of tricked out in Special Forces uniforms. They were very familiar. So I was on guard immediately, and they said, they cut my ID, and they said, here's your suit, go out that door. So I looked at the door, and it was the exit to the officers' parking lot. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. And I said, why am I going out there? Where are my lawyers? Oh, your lawyers are waiting for you out there. So I said, I need to go to the bathroom. Can I go to the bathroom? And they said, yeah, go ahead. So I turned the corner and ran as fast as I could and hid in a closet for a day. So, I realized at that point, oh, this is pretty serious. I mean, they tried to kill me.
I want to ask you about the thing that looms over you, that looms over your arrest, that looms over the activism towards freeing you, which is the idea of dual loyalty. Okay? This is a very sensitive topic.
No, it is. And I think I should use this as an opportunity to clear this up.
A lot of people claim that you're the reason why the idea of Jewish Americans possibly having dual loyalty exists. A lot of people claim that you set American Jewry back a half a century.
Uh-huh.
Okay? A lot of people claim that you did a lot of damage and that you brought the greatest fear of the community to the forefront. Okay? In the 1980s, by the way, when the American Jewish community was really getting to the height of their power.
Could I give you a quick answer to that?
I do want a quick answer, but...
Yeah, I don't give a damn. Because as far as I'm concerned, I'm a Jew first. Always. And if those Jews who consider me, or who considered my actions to have been a threat to their perceived loyalty as American citizens is concerned, I'd like to take this opportunity to say, I don't care. Why? The fact of the matter is, Galut is a curse. And instead of going after me, which is convenient, they should go after the government, who basically tried to enact collective punishment on the Jewish community for my personal sins. Every other minority spy in the United States was prosecuted as an individual, except perhaps for Wen Ho Lee, because, that was the beginning of the hunt against Chinese spies. And the Chinese community acted far differently than the Jewish community. The Chinese community came right out of the trenches and said, hold it. If this guy was a spy, then you prosecute him. Don't use him to tar the entire community. The difference in how the communities reacted was stark. The problem with me is, given the nature of my story, it really, I personally, and what I represent and what happened to me, represent the Jewish establishment's worst nightmare come true. And it isn't because of the issue of dual loyalty. That's too easy an explanation.
Do you think that there was a major display of fear of security amongst the Jewish leadership because of what happened?
Clearly, because as I said, their perceived status as 101% loyal Americans was called into question. If you actually feel that comfortable, then you shouldn't have reacted that way against me. You should have reacted against those in the government, like the then chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who admitted openly that I was punished harshly as a warning to the American Jewish community. Nobody complained about that statement. The problem with me is I kind of pulled the curtain back on both the exact nature of the U.S. Israel, quote, special relationship, and the relationship between the American Jewish community, especially the establishment, and the American political establishment in Washington.
So what's the perception? Tell me the perception.
The perception is that the United States and Israel are allies to the end.
Okay.
That we have basic fundamental values that we hold in common, and that we're basically on the same side.
Now, in your opinion, what's the reality?
The reality is there is no consistent policy in Washington. You have factions, which at any one time are in the ascendance or are dormant. I was a victim of that myself. I thought the relationship between the two countries was as it appeared to be. And the longer I stayed in the intelligence community, and I became a very, I guess, jaundiced observer of what the reality was, I suddenly realized that misperception is a very dangerous thing. The fact of the matter is that there are certain elements in the American security and political establishment and intelligence community that have always felt this way about the American Jewish community, that they are somehow suspect.
What was the thing that made you say, this ain't no special relationship?
When I saw that information that should have been going to Israel under the terms of an agreement, an exchange agreement, was being very consciously withheld.
What was the moment where you were like, I have to do this? What is that says, I have to betray my country for the other country that I love?
What do you value more? The country of your birth or the country of your heritage? And that, I didn't have a problem making that choice. It was the country of my heritage. Now, people ask me, well, didn't you have an option rather than breaking the law to act on your concerns for Israel and the Jewish people? And I went through that drill. I went up the ladder in the defense intelligence bureaucracy, trying to get an answer as to why we were blindsiding Israel. And doors were slammed in my face and nobody wanted to talk about it. Then I thought, well, okay, I could go to Congress or the House or the Senate Intelligence Committee behind closed doors and convey my concerns. And I would have been arrested for doing that, even under congressional protection. I could have simply said, okay, I look the other way and just get on with my life. And that was absolutely not possible. It came to a point where I realized I had to make a choice. And walking away from the problem and not seeking a solution, however ill-advised it might have been, was not an option for me.
Let's say I'm your biggest detractor, and there's one thing that you think I've misunderstood about everything that you are and everything that you did. What would you want me to know?
I'd want you to know that, first of all, I was never charged with intent to harm the United States. And second of all, that the nature of the damage, quote unquote, that I did, which I later saw in writing 20 years after the fact, was, as Caspar Weinberger later admitted, small beer. It was that I angered some Arab allies who felt I made Israel too strong, alavai, and that I provided information to Israel that should have been provided under a quid pro quo, but which wasn't. So that was the actual damage. That's it. Everything else that the American Jewish community has been led to believe is, to put it bluntly, a lie. if you look at my indictment, and a lot of people haven't, if you actually read my indictment, it says very plainly that I spied without intent to harm the United States.
Mm-hmm. That's actually something that's been made very clear, right, to anybody that's followed your case in a
let's deal with the issue of all these wild claims of damage. I think you'll agree that there's some information that is so sensitive that it shouldn't be leaked to anyone, even the closest of allies.
Speaking as an American, I would have to agree whether or not I'd be speaking as an Israeli or as an American, because I'm both. Did you find information like that?
Actually, no, because my collection, contrary to how it was portrayed, was quite focused. There is some information, as I said, that should never, ever be compromised to anyone. Okay. Because if it were, the damage would be incalculable. And under those circumstances, that person could have and should have been charged with intent to harm the United States, because he should have known that compromising that information would do serious damage. But my indictment was never changed, which means that all of the allegations that I had harmed national security were a lie. Because if I had, I would have been charged appropriately.
Well, there are claims that you sold information to Pakistan.
Yeah, the last time...
And there are also claims that you stole information on China, and those documents were found in your home.
There were a lot of documents found in my home. First of all, there was just a procedural problem of getting the documents back to where they...
I mean, did you sell information to Pakistan?
No.
Did you sell information to China?
No.
Did you sell information about China?
No.
Did you sell information about Pakistan?
No. If I had, I would have been charged.
Did you ever sell information to any other country other than Israel?
No. No. And the fact of the matter is, I was never charged with doing so. Given the fact that the government tried everything in their power to throw everything but the kitchen sink, and there were a couple heavy objects that looked like a kitchen sink that went by my head from time to time, if there was any hint, any credibility, any evidence that I had done something like that, boy, I would have been charged with it immediately.
Well, I mean, the only thing that I could say to that is that it does give plausibility to why you were in prison for so long, if that's...
Well, I confessed to being a Pakistani spy.
I don't remember that.
And passed a polygraph.
I didn't know that you admitted to being a Pakistani spy, but why would you do that?
It's called misdirection.
But, I mean, you also admitted to being a spy for Israel, so what was the point?
No, that was later. When I was in...
I would just choose Israel over Pakistan any day of the week. It's an enemy of the United States.
Context.
Okay.
The last time I was here, my instructions were to arrange things to make it look like I was a Pakistani spy. In fact, when I went to the embassy, the Israeli embassy, under orders, most of the FBI was posted up by the Pakistani embassy waiting for me to make a run for it there. So it actually worked, but eventually when everything came out and they understood the context for my admission, it was dropped.
I'm getting ready for my bar bat mitzvah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 13 years old.
Right.
If you could sum up everything that you have learned in one sentence, your time in prison, spying, returning to Israel, losing your wife, remarrying, your entire existence, one sentence, what would it be? And I will tell you this, no one has actually given me only one sentence.
Never lose your faith in God, comma. Never lose your faith in your fellow Jew, comma. And never lose your faith in your obligation to the land and people of Israel, period.
Strong stuff.
It's what I live by.
I want to thank Jonathan Pollard for inviting us into his home and for joining me on this episode of Wine with Adam. We are filming Wine with Adam today in the city of Jerusalem, in the home of Jonathan Pollard. If you would like to find the wine that we are drinking, you can go to wineonthevine.com or wineonthevine.org. You can plant a vine at wineonthevine.org/JNS with the Kabir Winery. You can buy a bottle of wine at wineonthevine.com or wineonthevine.org. I just want to say a l'chaim to my guest, a l'chaim to Israeli wine. Pretty much thank you so much for joining me and having such a lively conversation with me.
My pleasure.
And remember, if you're drinking your Israeli wine, drink it with somebody you love. L'chaim.
Chaim.